Hello everyone, this is Larry Webb, and in this very brief presentation about greeting cards, I'm going to cover about 5 different elements very briefly, just to give you an overview, a very quick overview of why you might consider selling greeting cards. And before we get started, let me just say there are lots and lots of resources online, and I will mention some of those at the end of this presentation. You'll see some things on the screen here. But do take a look. There's a lot of information out there. So we're going to try to cover first, why sell greeting cards. Secondly, what images might you sell? And that's very related to our third subject, is who is your market? Who is your target audience? Next, we'll talk very briefly about production of greeting cards, your choices there. And fifth, we'll talk about just a very few business elements involved in the possibility of selling greeting cards. And the last thing we'll do is, as I mentioned, I will put up some resources that you might want to look at. It'll be just a few, but again, if you go online and do a search for greeting cards, you should get lots and lots of returns. As I was preparing for these comments, I did go online and I Googled the term greeting cards, and I got 109 million hits. So a lot of reading out there. Okay, let's begin by talking about why you might want to sell greeting cards. One of the things I should tell you first, though, is I've been a photographer since I was a very young teenager. And over the last, 20 or 30 years or so, I've found great pleasure in making greeting cards for personal friends and family members, sometimes for special occasions, sometimes just to say hello. But in the last couple of years, I have evolved into a more entrepreneurial kind of inquiry about all of this. So even in preparing these comments for you today, I myself have also learned a lot. So one of the purposes you might be making greeting cards is for personal friends and personal family members, and just the personal pleasure of knowing that other people are seeing images that you are proud of. The second thing, though, that I want to mention briefly here is that with that personal sense of satisfaction, hopefully you are creating greeting cards that mean something to you and that do bring you pleasure. I'm old enough now to know that we should be involved in activities or careers or journeys or whatever that do bring us pleasure. One of the next things I'll mention here is that sometimes greeting cards will introduce your audience to you for the very first time. And so they might become interested in following you, so to speak. Whether you're selling online or selling in a particular bookstore, they might be very pleased with the first card of yours they see and might want to go to your website and purchase prints or other greeting cards, or even these days various and sundry products like coffee mugs. If you have have an image that you think might be saleable there, and you choose to have your images appear on coffee mugs or calendars or all sorts of possibilities. Again, take a look at places like Etsy, ETSY, or Smug Mug or Redbubble. There are just a lot of places out there where you might get some ideas about what's selling just by taking a look. But the other thing, if people see your greeting cards and notice your website, if you have one, and I strongly do suggest you consider that, maybe you could share that with other photographers who are also interested in getting started in selling greeting cards or other images. But people might go there and say, hey, this person is a pretty darn good photographer. Let me buy a print. It might be that someone who buys a greeting card and then a print might work somewhere, and that company, that corporation, might need images. Or perhaps they're connected with an advertising or design company. So it's amazing the kinds of things that can be born from your selling a greeting card. That might, as I said, lead to commissions or work with interior designers. I will tell you very quickly here, I have a friend in Atlanta. I'm a Georgia guy, and I have a friend in Atlanta who sees some of my images on Facebook, and she wrote me a couple of months ago and said, hey, do you have more of these particular images? I had posted something of shells on a beach. And so she and I, it turns out, are in the process of following up the possibility of my supplying some images both to a gallery and to an interior designer in Atlanta. Okay, the last part of this why selling greeting cards, of course, is money. And it is possible to make income from greeting cards. I will be quite honest with you, though, unless you go, unless you're doing some pretty serious marketing or choose a way that does get your images in front of a lot of people, you probably won't make a full-time living selling greeting cards. But again, they can be sort of the gateway product that will lead to some other possibilities for income. And if you also collect, if someone sees your work along the way who collects art, they might be very interested in pursuing the kind of work that you are doing and in making some very serious purchases of some larger pieces. Okay, the second thing let's look at briefly is what images should you sell? Well, again, I hope that your images, whatever you're pursuing, are images that you are passionate about, a topic. But very related to what images to sell is who is your market. And when I teach college classes on photography or video production or whatever, I always talk with my students about the importance of defining your target audience. It can be a fairly broad market that you're thinking of, or for many of you, more focused on nature photography. Okay, also just looking at what kind of images you have already shot or what you plan to shoot is very important in deciding on, do I have enough material here, and is it good enough for me to sell images on greeting cards? Unfortunately, today we don't have time to get into things like the photography itself in terms of framing or a choice of shots or color or design. But I do want to say you need to think about what catches your audience's eye. If they're in a bookstore, or if they're in a grocery store, or if at an arts festival and they see your work, what is going to catch their eye? Is it color? Is it focus? Is it point of attention, central point of attention of the image? Those kinds of things. Again, a lot of information online. Okay, let me share some other information while we're talking about your market here. I've learned a lot of stuff in getting ready for this from the Greeting Card Association. I will put their link up at the end of this. But just a couple of the things that they summarized again for me. Selling greeting cards is a huge market. They say that over 6.5 billion greeting cards get sold each year, and with estimated sales for all of those between $7 and $8 billion. If you make any of significant amounts of that figure, let me know. We'll go to lunch. Okay, also 9 out of 10 households, 9 out of every 10 households in the U.S. buy greeting cards every year. The good news is that the Greeting Card Association reports that the market is way up for the fourth year in a row. Sales of holiday-based cards are increasing. Birthday cards are still the best-selling card type. Most buyers are women. 80% of all people who buy greeting cards are indeed women, and they likely will be buying several cards at once. So you can keep that in mind also, depending on the particular market that you are trying to tap. One of the things I'll share very briefly with you is that the changes in people's lifestyles, like getting married or having a child or purchasing a house, those are the kinds of things that seem to drive many card buying habits. Also, the good news is millennials, people who were born between, let me check my notes here. Millennial is someone born between 1981 and 1996. They are buying a lot of greeting cards these days. So you can think about that if you have images that you might tweak or might edit or choose to address that particular age group. That might be a very smart thing for you to think about. Okay. Also, on the matter of what you're going to sell and who's your market, I want to put up just several components here that I'm reading. There are 5 key factors that are considered the key elements in helping someone decide what to buy in the matter of a greeting card. One is the right message and tone. One is pleasing art and design. Another is the relationship relevance. Is that card relevant to someone's relationship with the recipient, appropriate subject matter, and then last is the perceived value for the money. And most greeting cards are priced between $2 to $5. There are exceptions to that, and the millennials, by the way, are buying more and more expensive cards, sometimes, usually between about $5 to $10. But sometimes those have some extra technology involved, and you can read all about that, again, at the resource I'll give you a little bit later. Okay, let's move on to item number 4 here. Okay, let's talk about production. You certainly have the option of making your own greeting cards by hand, and I will admit that for most of the last 10 years, when I have been making greeting cards for personal friends, I have been making those by hand. In other words, I've been creating the print itself, either an archival or a more contemporary, a little bit less expensive print itself, and buying the card stock with matching envelopes or whatever was required. I will tell you there's a place called Photographer's Edge, and you can find that online, and it will give you lots of information about their products. And I get their catalog, their print catalog, and it's very fun to see what other photographers are doing, and occasionally to still buy that material. However, I will tell you, about 2 years ago, just before I did my first arts festival, I did get my cards made commercially, and I was extremely pleased. They don't have quite the handmade feel, of course, that if you are the one who are placing the photo and adhering it, etc., it's not quite the same. But depending on the kind of volume you plan on, you might consider a commercial printer. I do have one, and I'll put the link up here at the end of this presentation. Just down the road from me is a place called Postal Dispatch, and I'll put the information up. By the way, anywhere you do look for a printer, just ask them for a rate card. Just get whatever you're going to do. Get it in writing. Get a quote. Sometimes there are labor fees attached in addition to the print charges. Often there are volume discounts. So if you order, say, 20 or 50 or 100 cards of the same image, very likely you'll get a discount on that along the way. So, last thing I want to mention before I throw some resources up here is certain business elements. When I was teaching college, I would always tell my photography or my video students, keep your nose clean. And by that, I simply mean pay unto Caesar what is due to Caesar. So if you're doing business in a community like Asheville or somewhere, check with your North Carolina and your local business rules about sales tax, for example. Also, I hope you know about model releases or property releases. Again, if you go online, you can find information about what's a model release. That's simply if you're going to be making money off an image you sell and there is a recognizable person in that photograph, ideally you would have a model release from them. It's simply a form that they sign if they're a minor under the age of 18. You can get an adult or a guardian, a parent or guardian, to sign off on that. Property release it's always a good idea if recognizable property appears in your images. Get someone to sign off on that. Get the manager of the place or the owner, whatever, just to sign a simple form saying, "Hey, I give Joe Schmo here or Jill Smith permission to use the image of my property in their commercial enterprises." It's not that complicated. Again, there are model release samples and property release samples online. Okay. The other thing I would strongly suggest to you, and I learned this early in my career as a video producer long ago, was keep track of your expenses. I love spreadsheets, and I've taught several of my friends the joys of spreadsheets, of simple spreadsheets. But if you buy cardstock, or if you're traveling to take a certain image, or if you're putting out this expense for this or that, whatever it is, always just keep those receipts, start a spreadsheet, or at least start some kind of a list, so that if you do make a profit, you can claim those expenses with Uncle Sam or with the state of North Carolina in this case. So just be smart, even if you're doing this as a hobby or a sideline, just track it. And if you get to the point where you're not really clearing enough income that you don't feel, according to the tax laws, that you don't need to, state that income, you can change your mind about just saying, okay, I'm just having fun here. I'm not going to worry about whether I'm making a profit or not. I will tell you very briefly, I did lose in my first couple of years of business long ago. I lost on two different projects in 1 year. I lost about $300 on one and $400 on the other, thinking I was going to net a profit, and I didn't. I just was not tracking things. So again, there's lots and lots of resources online. So, okay, I think that's pretty much it for now. There's a lot more information that I have here in front of me or in between my two ears here, hopefully, but maybe that's enough for us to get started. Meanwhile, here are those resources, and I look forward to our continuing the conversation.